all this energy was just an overabundance, right? And so I was a crazy little kid. And when you got too much energy, it's difficult to stay on task, difficult to concentrate, difficult to focus. And that was, usually the first couple of things on my report card, and I think a lot of families and my parents can relate to that. Their kid is just seemingly out of control with energy. So sports, to my father, was truly an outlet to help me kind of hone in and focus my energies so that when I had time to concentrate when I got back home for homework or when I was in the classroom, I was in a much more focused and calm environment.
When you were 12 years old, you got interested in short track speed skating when you were watching the Olympics in Lillehammer. What was it that grabbed you about the sport?
There's something really special about short track speed skating. I was so young. I was watching these athletes race around on this hockey rink wearing these outfits that made them look like superheroes. They were wearing 17 and a half inch long samurai sword-like blades on their feet, leaning over at these impossible angles, hugging the corners at 35, 40 miles an hour. It looked impossible to me. And then when my father took me to Vancouver to see a competition live, I really just fell in love with the sport. And I said that I had to try it. It's unlike anything you've ever seen. It looks like it defies the laws of physics. It's a beautiful sport, but very ballistic and explosive in nature. And, my father was the one who kind of nudged me and pushed me into actually trying it. And that's how my career began.
I also assume, Apolo, from having heard you over the years talk, that one of the things that appealed to you was the strategic nature of being a competitor in that sport, and also the mental aspect of breaking down a race, breaking down a competitor in order to get your best performance. Am I correct in that observation?
Absolutely. Strategy and the mind games and mental toughness and mental strategy in short track is very, very apparent to making sure you have to win, or to put yourself in the best possible position to win. So short track speed skating is not always about just grit and about, your physical attributes. It really has a lot to do with strategy. And a lot of the time that I had won most of my races, I actually wasn't the fastest guy on the ice. I wasn't the strongest athlete out there. I wasn't the most gifted, but I was able to outmaneuver, and I had the better strategy.
I thought it was interesting. Your journey towards speed skating your dad decided to send you out of Seattle to Lake Placid after the 8th grade. And I loved his quote. He said, "I escorted Apollo to Lake Placid. When I left, you could imagine the uncertainty. I didn't know if it was going to work out or not." Did you both feel that way?
The first time my father took me to Lake Placid, he dropped me off at the airport. I said goodbye. He drove off, and I took my bags. This was after weeks and weeks of kind of badgering back and forth of him telling me I needed to give this opportunity a chance, and me telling him that I didn't want to, and I wanted to stay in Seattle for the summer. I didn't want to go all the way to the other side of the country. I didn't know anybody there. It was a very foreign place to me. And so when he dropped me off, I walked right to the payphone, called a friend, had a friend pick me up from the airport, and spent the next 9 days bouncing around from house to house, all while my father thought I was actually in Lake Placid, New York, upstate New York, until he finally gets the phone call. He was so mad. He thought that I was so mad I just wasn't calling him because he made me go. And the phone call, the junior development coach in Lake Placid, Patrick Wetland, my first coach ever, said, "Mr. Ohno, we're just kind of curious if you still plan on sending your son out here. The offer's still wide open. We pulled some strings to allow your son to come in a year early. The age, minimum requirement is the age of 15, and your son is 14, and we didn't notice anyone was at the airport. Just kind of curious if you still had plans to attend our program." And my dad, still with this, pretty thick Japanese accent, responded, "Oh, you lost my son," right? So it was an interesting time, I think, in both my father and I's life and our relationship together. I was at that age where I defied authority, and I thought that I had all of the answers and ideas to what was going on around me, when in reality I didn't, right? I really didn't. So, I eventually, next time I went to the airport, my father walked me through security, walked through the gate, and I realized he was actually getting on the plane with me. We arrive in Lake Placid, New York. He walks right up.